not in IT. Nice, nice. So yeah, we started kind of in IT, but then we want to get more exposure outside of IT, because we work with other people, obviously departments outside of IT. So I think it helps for people to know what we're doing at the same time us knowing what they're doing, so how we can kind of bridge that gap between technology and clinical or financial. So it's awesome. So it's good. I always ask that question because it's always good to see like a 50-50 or a good mix. So yeah, I usually do these about every quarter, and we've started with IT people, but then we now have grown to outside of IT. So my last, we've had the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Leibowitz, who's the president over at Methodist now. We've had Willie Manzano, who's the Executive Chief Nursing Officer, and then now we have our special guest today. And then next, we'll probably have Laura. So Laura Faris will probably be joining us. Yeah. Well, I don't know if we can. We'll see about the venue. But yeah, thanks to everyone for coming. Again, there's food and water and drinks back there. So pretty much the format is, I'm going to have with our guests, I'm going to be like kind of they call me the Chinese Oprah, Asian Oprah. So pretty much the first half an hour we'll have like a conversation, casual conversation with Rick, and then the second part of the segment we'll open up to questions from the audience. So we'll have Q&A, so make it a little more dynamic. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. So our guest has worked at NYP, but he loved it so much, he came back again. He also probably came back again because got this cool title called CXO, which, how can you not come back to a title like that? So please, give it up for Rick Evans. Yes, you've been. You got to talk pretty close.
So I feel like I'm on The Price is Right.
Yeah, I would try to use this one.
Okay.
You got to talk pretty close to this prompt.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thanks for coming to Bits-N-Bytes.
If you're Oprah, is there something under everybody's chair?
Yeah. No, that's a surprise. Yeah, so thanks for being our guest. It's awesome to have you here, and I know we've been trying to schedule with my people and your people, and it's difficult with the schedules. But tell us, so I know a lot of us here probably don't know what a Chief Experience Officer is. So can you tell us a little bit about what a CXO is? I mean, that's a cool title.
So I agree, it's a very cool title. My parents are very, very proud. They don't know what it is, but they're very proud. So Chief Experience Officers, it's a title that really came into healthcare probably in the last 6 or 7 years. And our role is to make sure that in our organization we understand what our patients and families think of their experience when they come to the hospital, and that we are working every day to make that better. There are metrics for patient experience, what we used to call patient satisfaction, and those metrics are now out there in the public, so people are using them. Patients and families are becoming more consumers in the market, so they're making choices, so the ratings matter. Think about your own life. We make purchases, we look at ratings now. Healthcare is the same. And there's also reimbursement now at stake, both with our public and private payers. So it's always been the right thing to do. I mean, I hope we all believe that, but more than ever in these times, it's something we need to do to be competitive. And so a person like me exists in the organization to make sure that we're aware of how we're doing and that we're strategic about what needs to be done to move the needle on patient experience.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your background. And so you have a master's degree in theology and bachelor's in philosophy. So how in the world did you end up in healthcare?
I studied actually right after high school. I went into college to be a priest, to be a Catholic priest. And I got really close. Back in those days, you'd go to a college seminary and get your theology or your philosophy degree. We which is essentially where you learned how to think and write, really, because that's mostly what, there's no multiple choice tests in philosophy, it's all writing. And then I went to what they called major theology school, which is sort of where you learn the priest stuff. And right before ordination, I bailed. So I'm the runaway groom of the Catholic Church. And if you want to know more about that, come talk to me. But decided to leave and ended up in the not-for-profit sector first. So my first job was running a soup kitchen and homeless shelter in Stamford, Connecticut, not far from here. There are homeless people in Fairfield County, and they needed assistance. Got into drug prevention work after that because I saw so many people in the soup kitchen who I wanted to work a little more upstream from the issue. And then I had a national job. Some of you might be old enough to remember, I know I am, Nancy Reagan and the Just Say No drug campaign back in the 80s. Back in the last century. And there was a national group called the National Federation of Parents for Drug-Free Youth, and I became their national director. I thought that's what I wanted to do. Spent a lot of time in Washington. I got to know Bill and Hillary pretty well. I've got pictures if you want to see them. But it didn't feel very fulfilling to me, actually. I was doing a lot of traveling, a lot of speech making. It just didn't feel substantial to me. And that's when I pivoted into healthcare. My mom's a nurse, so I love nurses. I have enormous respect for people in healthcare. My early mentors were in healthcare. And my entry into healthcare was actually to run a hospital foundation, because I know how to beg. I know how to raise money. And from there, I got into operations and other patient experience work. My patient experience career began when the CEO of the hospital I was working at came to me and he said, Rick, we got these Prescaney results. I know you went to theology school, so these are bad results. Can you help make them better? So I often say I pray for better results. I do, actually. But that was the beginning of my career, was sort of figuring out, well, what do these numbers mean? And what do we need to do to make them better? And I've been really blessed ever since with my career.
That's amazing. And so in philosophy, you said there's no multiple choice, but is there really a right or wrong?
There is, well, in the Catholic philosophy, there's a right and wrong. But again, I think what I learned in philosophy school was how to think through issues and problems, and then how to express myself in writing. In theology school, in addition to learning how to do confession and mass and all those things, I learned how to listen to people, how to read people. You're trained in theology school, you may not believe this, but how to preach. It's actually called homiletics. So I was trained how to speak publicly, which I use, including this very moment, I use every day. So I often say I'm glad I went and I'm glad I left. I feel like healthcare was what I was meant to do, but I'm really glad I went through that training.
Yeah, that's great. That's quite a background and a pivot. But I mean, I think in all experiences, you kind of take away from what you've learned in the past and leverage it in the future. So
we're trying to do
what you've done. What about the job? Did the chief experience officer really surprise you the most?
How hard it is. Everybody thinks patient experience, what? Smile more, just be nicer. If only it was that simple. So patient experience is about changing human behavior and the perception of that behavior by others. So think about if any one of us want to change any of our behavior, getting more steps, stopping smoking, any change to our routines, it's hard to do. And then to also make sure that that change or that behavior is perceived favorably by our patients and families it's really hard. The other thing that makes it hard here is we're in a very diverse area, which is a strength, but it's also a challenge because you've got to learn how to do things in a lot of different ways. And at New York Presbyterian, our scores that are on the web are not Lower Manhattan scores and Cornell scores and Columbia scores and Choney scores, they're NYP. So we have to make it good on all of our campuses and somehow have that roll up to a result. So it looks simple, it sounds kind of easy, but it's really hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. And this is not your first experience as a CXO. You were a CXO in Mass Gen.
Yes.
So do you see, coming in at to NYP, did you see a lot of the same challenges or the same problems over there versus here?
Similarities and differences. So the similarities is pretty much patient experience boils down to communication. So sometimes we think about parking and food and thread count in our linens and all those things, and I'm not saying those are unimportant, but ultimately, wherever I've been, it's really trying to make communication happen well for patients and families. Team communication, individual communication, it's all about that, and it's all about that everywhere. Mass General, NYP, any other institution, it's facilitating respectful, compassionate communication. There are differences, though. It's interesting, and I feel so lucky to have worked here. And even when I was at Mass General, I never stopped loving NYP. I do love the place. Something about it is very special. I bleed red, not purple. I bleed red.
That's my other question.
But Mass General's culture was different than ours. And one of the things that we're working on here that I think is very important is the respect and the credo that we're working on. And I feel like that's something that we're doing that's very worthwhile. That a little bit of that I sort of picked up at Mass General. And I don't mean that we aren't respectful, but I learned there some things that they did to engender respect across disciplines that is part of what we're doing here.
Right. What about the demographics? I mean, I can imagine the demographics are slightly or a lot different between tri-state New York versus Massachusetts.
Well, first there's the Red Sox-Yankee thing, which is very problematic.
Go Yankees!
Boston is not diverse like New York, and it's actually one of the things I missed during our 4 years there. Boston is still a very white city. It's a very racially polarized city, actually. And New York, diversity hits you the minute you walk out the door. It's just a fact of life for us. So the demographics are very different here, and I actually like it. I prefer it.
Right. That's awesome. As far as a patient experience strategy, what would you say are the essential elements for having a successful and sustainable patient experience strategy?
So let me brag for just a minute, and there's a reason for this. When I was here my first round, we put a strategy in place that resulted in 6 straight years of improvement in patient experience. So the needle actually moved. In Mass General, we had 4 years straight of movement, positive movement, and we are seeing movement here in our patient experience metrics. Now, that is not, I'm part of that, but it is about way more than me. But I do think our strategy is what's behind that kind of success. What does that mean? Patient experience improvement is quality improvement. It's not different. You have to have metrics. You have to set really specific goals. You have to bring evidence-based best practice, interventions, changes in behavior. You have to monitor those things, and you have to watch the needle. It's just like what we would do to reduce infections or readmissions or falls. It's just dealing with sort of another set of human behavior. So that's what we do. We make sure we're measuring the experience correctly. We look at the numbers. We put stakes in the ground in terms of goals. Actual numbers. We might be at a 65 on a topic, and by the end of the year we want to be a 70. And then we deploy evidence-based interventions to get us there, and we make sure we do those things consistently. So that's the work. It's block and tackling of quality improvement and bringing that rigor to patient experience. It's not posters and buttons, although sometimes we make posters. I will not make buttons. I draw the line at buttons. But it's really about hardcore quality improvement and focus, and that's what we're doing, and that's why we're getting better. We're reducing variation, we're standardizing processes that matter to our patients and families, we're helping support our caregivers at the bedside, and we're getting better. Which, again, I'm proud of, even though I don't take care of any patients. It's our staff, it's our teams that do that work. We just help give them the swim lane to help them succeed.
Right. So it's a lot about collecting the data, analyzing the data, and then kind of figuring out where we go from there.
Yep. And using proven best practices.
Okay.
So, patient experience has been around now as sort of a body of knowledge for 20 or 30 years. So there are things we know from literature, from study, that when you do those things consistently, you have a better experience. And those are the things we're working on here.
Right. So I'm not sure, but are you are NYP's first CXO?
I am.
Okay.
So I was Mass General's first CXO in NYP, so I'm a really lucky guy.
Pioneering that CXO.
Yeah, pioneer just means you're old. But I feel very lucky to have this role. I really do.
So when you came in to NYP, where on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say our patient experience was back then, and where do you think it's now?
So if I look back, my first tour of duty, which started in 2004, I'm not sure we knew where we were. I think we had to get our act together and figure that out, and it got better. I would say, let me be very concrete, this round, the second tour of duty, which started about a year and a half ago at the end of 2015, we, HCAHPS is one of the measures. HCAHPS is the inpatient patient experience measure that's publicly reported on the web for consumers, and they give you star ratings just like they do on Amazon. And our star rating for patient experience was 2 out of 5 stars. And I'm talking about New York Presbyterian here. Are any of you happy with that rating?
No.
No, that's not where we want to be. And we've now raised that to 3 stars on the web, so 3 out of 5. Okay, average. We don't think of ourselves as average. Our scores right now, our real-time scores, which go through a whole adjustment thing that I won't bore you with, we're 4 stars. So we are moving that needle. And what we aspire to be, I think we all believe this, we want to be the #1 hospital in the country and the world. That means #1 clinically, it means #1 in every way, including patient experience. So we want to be 4 or 5 stars. That's what we want to be.
Awesome. Okay, great. So we'll talk a little bit about the technology. So we're part of IT. So we hear the term digital patient engagement has many different meanings. What does digital patient engagement mean to you? Like where does the technology fit into your strategy?
So before I answer that, I do have to give a shout out. One of the coolest, best things about coming back to NYP for me has been the level of partnership that we've been able to create amongst our teams and divisions. Daniel Barchi, for example, who I think is extraordinary. But not just Daniel, but the whole team. We are partnering in a way that I dreamed about but never thought could happen. So that's just remarkable. We have similar partnerships like that with Sean and our HR team, with Willie and the nursing team, with the finance team. We've got partnerships that I have not seen or been able to experience before. So that is fuel. That's like rocket fuel in terms of our effort. So I want to give a shout out to my colleagues and to the teams, because there's something special going on here. I saw Sophia in the back. We've been working on texting discharge instructions to our patients. That idea, which improves that's a form of digital engagement. So instead of being just given a stack of papers on your way out, we can now text you once you're home and say, hey, remember those discharge instructions? We just want to remind you we gave them to you. So you can answer on the survey, yes, I got my instructions, right? But B, here's a link. And you can go right to those if you want to look at them right now, because now you're finally calm, now you're settled, now you might be able to look at those instructions. So that is a beautiful way to engage our patients digitally through technology. And here's the even more beautiful part. IT brought that idea to my team. Like, I could have tears in my eyes over that. That is beautiful. And other things that we're doing in patient experience, using technology, the telehealth work, the virtual visits. I mean, being at Mass General, we were talking about those things when I was there. We actually did them here. And we made them happen, in my view, at almost lightning speed. So we've got an engine here for innovation and creativity that I think is really going to benefit us. And our commitment to that, I think, will yield it. Because what patients want, they don't want paper anymore. Well, some of us still like a little bit of paper. We want to be able to do things for ourselves. We want one-stop shopping. We want to be able to log on to something and get what we need immediately. We want to make our own appointments. We want to be able to see a provider in the mode that works for us. Maybe I need to see somebody in person, but maybe some other times I would just like to Skype with them and be able to talk for 5 minutes. So we need to think like our patients and families. We need to be able to give them the technology that they can get in almost any other industry, right? Everyone else can give it to them.
Right.
Why can't we? So I think we're taking bold and, quite frankly, quick steps, and the partnership is very powerful. So I'm really excited about it.
So on the flip side, so we talked about how technology has helped, the initiatives. How do you think, so technologies I've heard sometimes the clinicians feel technology is kind of burdensome.
Yeah.
It adds additional work to them, and it takes away from them caring for their patients. Do you see that negative impact with technology?
Not only do I see it, I hear it almost every time I talk to somebody. So we're in this uncomfortable period where the technology is changing and we're sort of grappling with the way to right-size that and deploy it appropriately. And we're not there yet. We're in an organization that part of the record is paper, part is electronic. That was surfaced even in our most recent Joint Commission survey last week. So we're in this in-between period. Providers would tell you, and I'm quoting an MGH doc, but I think it's probably relevant. He said to me, Rick, I have an awesome 18-minute visit with my computer and a 2-minute visit with my patient. So we're in this time of flux and change, and it's very uncomfortable for our caregivers. I think in the long run, when we figure it out, it's going to be better. It's going to be a win-win. We're on our way there. The thing we're working on right now, the demands on our staff are enormous, enormous. And sometimes, we're an organization that wants an A+, right? We all want the A+, and that's what makes us great. There's a lot of checklists, a lot of tasks. We can get lost in our tasks and forget that the person in front of us is the patient. So I might be rounding on pumps. I might be rounding on meds. I might be documenting in the record. So what we're trying to work with our caregivers now is to say, look, that stuff has to be done. Let's not pretend that it doesn't. But how do you maintain a connection while you're doing that? And we're trying to do both. And in the long run, we want to make sure that wherever we end up technologically is in a place where it's truly a win-win. The day goes easier for the caregiver, and the day goes easier for patients and families. But this is an uncomfortable period. There's a lot of talk in my field right now about burnout of clinicians, and I think that's real. And technology is a part of that. But we've got to think our way and innovate our way through it. And I'm optimistic. It's just uncomfortable right now.
Right, until we get to that sweet spot. Can you tell us a little bit of your day-to-day? So I know you have this patient engagement, but then do you work a lot with our patients? And I know you have like I forget what it's called, like a patient group.
We have patient and family advisory councils.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we have for each of our campuses groups of patients and family members who advise us on important matters. We're actually trying to move beyond that. It's one thing to have patients in a room and once a month you sort of parade things by them and say, how do you like this? How do you like that? Here's a new brochure, or the color of our rooms, or the design of our... That's lovely. what we want to do is partner with our patients and families. So instead of talking to them, we should have patients on our quality committees and patients on our other important bodies that are part of our work, so that they're not additive, but that they're part of it. And that's where a lot of folks are going, and that's where we're going to go. Quite frankly, though, my team, we spend most of our time with the staff, with the caregivers, with our frontline staff. That's where our work is aimed at supporting them to help them succeed. So most of our work day to day is with nurses, doctors, housekeepers. That's where we're deployed.
Okay, great. As we all know, we're eventually can consolidate our EMR into a single EMR. How would you think having a consolidated EMR will improve the patient experience, or would it not?
Well, I think it will. And I just want to tell you, I am a veteran of the Epic rollout at Partners in Boston. Now, when I first arrived at MGH, one of the virtues that they preached was, there's this phrase called "let 1,000 flowers bloom." So everybody's a genius. Just be a genius. Just do your thing. And there is actually some real benefit to that. And I could see clearly MGH is an outstanding hospital. It's worked for 200 years. By the way, they still have their original hospital building. In New York, we would have demolished it, 150 years ago. But what that resulted in was 1,000 different legacy systems. So a neurosurgeon had his own or her own electronic system. So going from that to Epic was like akin to when they first used Ether at Mass General. It was that, life-changing. So I watched all that unfold, and it was difficult and painful. But in the end, there's a lot of good things that happen. It does allow you to standardize. And standardize it doesn't mean Stepfordize. You're not turning people into robots, but standardization is what really yields the kind of quality and consistency we want, true patient experience. Better for the patients, because you're not dealing with paper and then records and then a system at Cornell and a system at NYP, and I gotta have 2 portal accounts, and it's very, very complicated. It allows us to extract data in a way that allows us to affect change, I think, much more powerfully across the enterprise. In the long run, if we do it right, it has the potential to make providers' days go a little easier. Now, there's still a lot of clicks, but I think there are ways that you can improve the quality of life for the people who provide care.